So I think it's important that I explain some things. When to use local variables and when to use global variables. You see, whenever you realize that a variable will be used by more than one function, then you make it a global variable. Here we have two functions. Yeah. This is using the variable and this is also using the same variable. So this A is being used by this function and it's also being used by this function. Then definitely it must be a global variable. But when you realize that a variable will only be used by one function, for instance, this B is only being used by this function, and but we are not using it inside this function, then you can make it a local variable. The reason I said can is this. There may be some instances whereby it will be used by one function, but then you may still want to make it a global variable. An example is what we did the other time when we did something like this. You know, this each time you click on this, if it's a local variable, each time you click on this, it will recreate it. It will keep recreating it, meaning it's not going to get the initial value. It's going to always set this to 4. Each time I click on this button, this will always go back to 4. But maybe I want to get the initial, I want to keep the initial value, then I make this a global variable so that when I click on this, it will be 9. When I click on it again, B will change from 9 to 9 plus 5, that's 14. B will change to 14. When I click on it again, it's changed to 19. I don't like that. So if I want to keep the initial value, then I can make it a global variable. But if it's like this, each time you click on it, it's going to recreate this each time. So you make it a local variable. So if you think that a variable is going to be used by that function alone, then you make it a local variable. Like for most times, you will need to make it a local variable and not a global variable. So the summary of this part is that if a variable will only be used by that function, try to make it a local variable. But if it's going to be used by more than one function, definitely make it a global variable. It's not good that you make all your variables global. It's not a good practice. You want to limit the number of global variables as much as possible. You don't just want to make all variables global. It's not a good practice. As much as possible, you want to make things local. Isn't this because when a variable is local, it is not it is not dependent on too many factors. It is only dependent on what happens within that function, and it makes your code easier to debug. So I encourage you to use local variables more, but whenever you realize that that variable will be used by more than one function, then you make it global. So that's one thing you need to know about local variables and global variables. So you know when to use them now. When to make it local, when to make it global. If it will be used by that function alone, make it local. If it will be used by more than one function, definitely think about global variables.